just for me. I've got no expectations. I wanna be like a baby. They don't believe in themselves. They're so enthralled with all that's involved. They've got no time to be conscious of self. I really believe in babies. I can even be one myself. I'd rather make an enemy out of a friend to love the enemy within. I wanna be like a baby. I wanna forget myself. I'd rather make a mark on my skin and miss the mark, playing to win. I wanna be with my baby. She likes me all by myself. I've gathered tendencies and serendipity. She's oh so patient. I can't believe that she still puts up with me. I wanna be with my baby. I love her more than myself.
What's up, everybody? Can you hear me out there tonight? Let me know if you can hear me, that my audio is working. Yeah. Hoping McMo breaks out his saxophone. Give me a comment if you can hear my voice working through the audios. And we'll get started. What's up? What's up? Any feedback, people? Some feedback. I'm going to start talking. Okay, Chris, thank you so much. Awesome. Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a special edition of Yours Truly Live. Tonight, we have the exciting opportunity to host McMosiv's album release party for his full-length album, McMosa. McMo is not a stranger to this little corner of the internet, and I was thrilled when he reached out with me to the idea, and I'm honored to help promote his debut album. I'm excited for us to hear the story of the album, the meaning behind it for McMo, his favorite track, his influences, his hopes, dreams, and reality based on this work. Hit the like and subscribe to help support his work and get this stream out there to help support McMo's album. I won't belabor this intro anymore, so let's get into it on this special edition of Yours Truly Live. So without any further delay, I give you Mick Mo Siv. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.
What's up? What's up? I got the sax out for Phlebas.
The alto.
Yep, the alto. One small correction.
Oh, no.
Before I smother you in gratitude. This is not my debut album. This is my sophomore slump, baby.
Well, I when I looked on Spotify, I only saw singles.
Yeah, you know,
I
threw you off my, I threw you off my scent, or whatever. I bamboozled you. Yeah, there's an album on there. It's called Burning Bush. If you want to hear a little bit more weird music. But dude, thank you so much for making the branding for me. What a Uno reverse card you've pulled on me.
Was it McMosive enough? Did it enough?
Hey man, I saw it. I saw the DNA, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the effort. That was very lovely. I was getting a little sweaty seeing big names in the chat like Neil and Phlebas, and so I was calming myself saying the Jesus prayer, and then I saw that, and I was like, oh man, that is good. But that reminds me, I do need to start off with an apology, because that song that was playing during your branding, the reason you could play it is because I forgot to. It's supposed to be a part of the album. I forgot to include it when I uploaded the album, so it got lost. And the sad part was that was Chad the Girl Dad's favorite song when I sent him the demos. So
and we can all guess why.
So yeah, so go ahead and keep an eye out. Maybe next week or the week after, I'll be able to upload that single. If you just can't get enough after hearing my new album, that single will be coming hot and ready just for Chad the Girl Dad. So look out for that.
Well, how are you feeling right now? I saw you drop the link on Twitter this morning. I was like, you weren't supposed to do that till tonight, man.
My bad, dude. My bad. Yeah, I kind of scooped you there. Sorry.
It's your thing, man. I was just like,
yeah. So, it's kind of interesting. I was actually thinking about this today. Like, why am I so averse to kind of promoting the music that I make for myself and, under my own name and that kind of thing? Because in some ways, like, because of my professional life, and some of my past, like, I know how to do the thing. I know how to send it to college radio stations and, write the emails and submit it to playlists and, try to get it on this playlist, that playlist, into the ears of small label owners and all of that stuff. And for one thing, I found that it was much easier to do that for my friends, and to kind of scheme that kind of stuff when it wasn't about me. But then it was also me and my buddy who I've made the most music with. His name's Isaac Innen. We talked a lot about this because he had some experience in the secular music scene, and was fairly convinced that it was demonic to the core. And then some of the stuff he and I saw together, we were like, yeah, I think we should make our music and then maybe promote it as little possible and just trust at that time we probably would have said, I would have said God, and he would have said the universe. But just to get it to the people who need to get it to, or it needs to be gotten to. But with this album in particular, I felt a different type of thing. I felt a little bit more hopeful. Not that it would get traction or that, I would blow up and be famous, because that's, I kind of never really wanted that, even when I pretended or told myself I did. So there was basically, I just kind of realized that I didn't want to promote myself again. But what I did really want was to make sure that everybody who was in TLC and who has kind of helped, maybe not so much in the writing. There's probably 2 songs on this album that I wrote kind of post TLC and that were kind of, influenced, I guess, by TLC stuff, or the Peterson Sphere. But yeah, so it's kind of like, I think one of the things for TLC when I first started participating was like, oh wow, this might be a group of people who, because of the high and openness, because of the mostly just the high and openness, but there's also a sensibility of the kind of absurdity to the current days and the internet that I thought like, oh wow, this might be for the first time a group of people who would like really get what I was trying to do. So we could talk about that, but like I told you before,
what are you trying to do?
So I'm very pretentious, so I'm trying to do a lot of things. I started writing this album when I kind of settled on the term Christian absurdism or Christian absurdist for myself. And you'll relate to this. Like, it started out, I thought it was going to be like this treatise on like a new philosophical idea, in the history of human thought that would make Kierkegaard and Hegel proud. And I was going to do it with an avant-garde electronic, genre-less, meta-modern, album that very few people listen to. And I just thought like that paired with my process of making music, which is very, I would say, akin to like a religious practice, like a, how a lot of people will read Lives of the Saints every day, or will read, I'm forgetting the Protestant ones, or the
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis every day. There's, what am I? My utmost for his highest was the one I was trying to remember. That I read that for like every day in like the 7th grade or something, and it made me the man I am today. But then yes, I realized that I couldn't really it was really difficult to kind of write songs from that perspective because I wasn't having fun. It was like I was writing a song that was like infinity is nothing, nothing is infinity, because I was just, I was so obsessed with this idea of how, like, when you really start defining them, infinity and nothing, infinite nothingness are basically the same thing, and it was like trying to fit in a lot of Kierkegaardian ideas or my interpretations of Kierkegaard, into something that was like hip hop or soul or but then what ended up happening is it became an album about friendships and friend groups and relating to friends and losing friends and gaining friends. And so in the end, I think the first song is kind of the thesis statement where it's like, brother, take my hand. Brother, 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 can you show me the way, kind of a thing. I don't even remember my own lyrics. Sorry, y'all. It's not how it works for me. But yeah, so it's kind of a thesis statement in the sense of I wanted it to be something for my friends, to my friends, and was hoping that basically God would use it, even though it was not like, it's not worship music and it's not, genre wise. I consider myself, it's certainly on the lo-fi end of things. It's certainly on the experimental side of things. It's certainly on the postmodern or metamodern side of things. And there's reasons I have, I could talk for days about why I think all of that is important. But I'll just leave it at that for now and I'll let you lead the convo.
Well, you're leading that, but I definitely, to go back to the part about self-promotion, that was always the weirdest thing as a worship leader. Like, what am I doing? How does this fit? Like that always felt weird, but I think but like you're saying, it almost just feels weird regardless. And as I've gotten, like, with my relating to it now, like promoting, like a podcast or a type of show, like I just have to remember, like, how many people don't care about me. And it's almost like, if you are trying to connect to the world, like, all that is just trying to, like, it's just the signal that you're looking for the connection with. And so, I mean, it's still hard. I still feel like everyone that looks at me or my Twitter is just like, yeah, Neil, I've never met a worship leader that doesn't feel weird about it. Exactly. Yeah. And
you guys haven't met the worst of the worst or the best of the best, depending on how you look at it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and so that I realize, okay, this is, at least for me, or, if it's not like you're already famous or you have like a whole machine behind you. And I think even Neil from Dirtport Robbins, like, I mean, he does a lot of his own stuff, because it's like, well, how else do you do it if you don't have a machine, And so there's that, just kind of owning that as part of it. But also, like you said, you could put the link out there, McMo, like you did on Twitter today, like at 9:00 this morning, and be like, oh shit, nobody's listening. It's like, oh, it's like, or we could try to, like, make an event around it to kind of create a moment, and I think that's what I'm learning. And that this is also, like, to the meta part about what you're talking about. What did this end up being about for you? You said it's more became being about relationships. And that's continually, like, as I'm thinking about this project on the internet, like how that relates with what I'm doing, I think that is what I'm learning more, and I'm thinking more about, other than just my individual project or whatever.
Yeah. So what got me to that thought, and it was one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I started making music like this in the first place, kind of a thing. Because back in 2021, when I released my first album, it came at a time when I was washing windows, listening to, you got to go to your preferred streaming platform, Grim. You can find me.
Oh yeah.
You retweeted my tweet on Twitter. You re-X'd my X on X, brother.
What should people search? What should people search, like, on Apple? Like, what's it, just the album title?
Yeah. You can search McMosav, and the album title is Mimosa, like a mimosa, like a mimosa from McDonald's, and then it'll be there. It'll have a picture of me that AI turned into a statue, and then I made it look like a grainy old Polaroid on my phone and upscaled it so that it would pass DistroKid's requirements. And that was the album artwork. But yeah, so the thing I realized, I kind of, it's funny because a lot of artists talk about making a deal with the devil, you know, and I felt like in a lot of ways I kind of had some mystical experiences out in the wilderness, and you know, it was almost like I made a deal with God kind of a thing, because I was like, please don't let me get famous, please don't let me get rich, I just want to be able to make music, and you know, this is how I felt connected to you. It was kind of like that what is it, I'm thinking I was about to say Blades of Glory. It's the dun 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 dun. You know that?
Yeah.
What is that? Something of fire?
Yeah, Chariots.
Chariots of Fire. Yeah. So that, like that, dude, like it, making music became my, you know, that's how I, in a large way, you know, in the dark night of the soul, still felt connected. You know, I was able to get in flow state, and it was an outlet for me that wasn't, it was purely productive. You know, it wasn't destructive. It didn't take me away from my wife. It didn't, you know, push me further into drugs or porn or, you know, all the worst of the worst things that can happen when you're in despair. So, but what I realized was I was really looking for the life of a nun, or a nun or a monk. You know, like I wanted the life of the monastery. And so I was listening to these recordings of Thomas Merton talking to a bunch of people. And I made the connection that was like, oh yeah, like the daily prayers is basically what I try to do with my art, which is I try to wake up before everybody in the world, and I try to concentrate. And thank you, sir. Yeah, funny. I mean, musicians will get this. I have a much easier time hearing myself talk than I do hearing myself sing. Like I can't stand the sound of my own voice singing, but I can listen to myself talk all day long, baby. I only have half the narcissism that I could have, I guess, is what that means. What was I saying? Yeah, Dirt Poor Robin's throwing me off my weave, man. Yeah, so it was the life of a monk. You know, I was looking for that kind of, and then it finally clicked during this album that, like, because I was making this music in a very prayerful manner, when I would kind of wake up and make a beat, and if I didn't feel like making a beat, I would listen to my beats and pray, and a lot of times that's where the lyrics would come from. And so I kind of had this very sacramental, you could say, view of the artistic process. It's also just a hobby. You know, I have to wake up early to do it, or I have to do it on weekends or late at night because I have a normal job, a day job. So, and then I made the connection, and it was more of an orthodox connection of like the aesthetic. You know, I'm an aesthetic. I probably can't.
Aesthetic.
That's a tongue twister.
Aesthetic.
But like in the sense that I wanted to kind of, I wake up early, or I do it late at night, or I do it when my wife's at work, so that I can kind of have that solitude it just be basically me, my computer, and God, or me, my ukulele, me, my saxophone, and God. And that I can do that work kind of for the life of the world, like a monk would pray for the world, you know, and they think they have this thought that they're kind of like the prayers of the saints or the prayers of the monks is what's kind of holding the world up. But then the connection too with TLC was that, like, I had people like you, I had people like Chad, I had people like Tayo, and many more, by the way. Well, not many more, but I had a lot of people who I felt called or compelled to send the demos to, and to get some early feedback that, like, basically nobody was hating it, and a lot of people, thanks for stopping by, and a lot of people were actually, it was like touching them, you know, or very helpful. They were enjoying it. It was kind of very encouraging. And so that's kind of when I decided to pull the trigger and, you know, release it and, you know, do my best at mastering. But I made a lot of mistakes, like I always do. But I also am very happy to have those mistakes in as a kind of, you know, the word I was thinking about, how do I justify the meta modernness or the sloppiness or all of the kind of seeming mistakes and mixing and mastering. And you know what? I'm just saying, have you heard of a gesture? A gesture, you know, when an artist sketches something out, sometimes in a masterwork of painting, you like to see the little imperfections, you know? And so, man, hell of a weave. I think I'm gonna stick the landing like that.
Yeah, dude, it's that's something that the creative process, you know, I feel like I'm just now catching up to what creative process is. As somebody that did music for basically a living all through his 20s, like I don't think I really was in touch with it. And I think part of it was because of just the modern frame. And I think I don't know if I you know, you're touching on a lot of like even your sound's very deconstructed. You know, you're talking about the postmodern nature of it. Um and I don't know if I've landed there completely, but it is kind of a building up from that deconstructive point and trying to continue to keep the things off, but be okay with the humanness of it. But also like being okay with trying wanting to be professional, but also being okay with being human. And I feel like the modern frame was like only professional. The postmodern frame is like only human or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. There is a weird like, I again like when I hear myself thinking or talking like this, there's a voice inside of my head that's like, you're just justifying laziness. You know, I'm a very neurotic person, so I can play it either way. You know, I could go pretty hard on myself on why I should spend twice as long and, you know, make the right decision at every mode. And I could also, you know, in the same line of thinking, think to myself, well, really, I should make these demos and then I should save up money for like 6 months and send it off to someone who's like a professional mix engineer. And it wouldn't even need to necessarily be anyone who's that much better than me at mixing, although there are a lot of people who are better than me at mixing. You know, most people who are, you know, anyone who's a professional mixer, and then most people who do it as a hobby are better than me. And then even more so with mastering, like I could pay someone else, and what that would do, and this is actually a conversation me and Chad had, which is like, Chad was basically like, man, this is really good. But if you want this to kind of explode or to hit the mainstream, quote unquote, I'm not sure if he used those exact words, but that's kind of what he was getting at. Then you're basically going to need to polish the turd a little longer. And I was kind of like, that's actually I want to be facing the exact opposite direction from that. I think that art for the last, you know how Eric Weinstein talks about how physics has basically been stifled by string theory. I think that musical creativity has, for the most part, been completely stifled by streaming, because there's little to no reward to push the boundaries whatsoever. And, you know, you can have a conversation about like what dictates quality in music. And I'll probably like going to agree with like the most conservative, like Robert Scruton type of person. Like, you know, I don't think anything better than Vivaldi's Four Seasons has really come. You know, maybe John Coltrane, A Love Supreme, you know, like I would put that up there with Vivaldi's Four Seasons for me personally. But in a lot of ways, like that's not the arena I'm even trying to play in, you know, like I'm really trying to be the person on the side of the road who is creating something that you've never heard before in your life. And so I think part of that is just my high and openness, but I've always been attracted to hearing things that didn't sound like stuff I've heard a million times before. You know, I was not a fan of people whose whole personality was like quoting movies. I always kind of was like, say something funny that you came up with, you know? LOL. Yes, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point you bring about it, I think two things. Parts of streaming or parts of an industry, it stifles creativity, but I think that it's bottoming out with AI in a way. Now it's like it was on its way down to the bottom, and it really opens up the opportunity because of the low, just like Jeremy's talking about, the low friction to get into to be able to get into a creative space. Like you used to have like a multi-million-dollar studio with producers to be able to get into a creative space. That's no longer the case. You know, even for me to take out part of a school loan to buy a Mac, what were they? PowerBook, a Mac PowerBook that had GarageBand on it so I could get an 1/8-inch connection to multi-track recording. That was still $3,500 back in 2003 or 4, 4 or 5, whenever I got that. And now you can pick up, you can download, I think even Spotify has like they have a software for like multi-track recording that's free that kids can just play on. And I think that is opening a space that you're saying that you're talking about, to where, and a lot of younger people I think are getting this to a degree, but it's going to be hard to know where they're finding like their true connection. It probably isn't, because you aren't thinking about as much, but there's possibilities there.
Yeah, what that makes me think of, it's like, it's very similar to, well, I think, like, I guess one way to put this is, we live in a very small window between basically music being incredibly easy to make, in the sense that with a few clicks of my buttons, I can make literally any sound I can think of.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately, if I can think it, I can make it, basically. And what people thought that would open up was, I think, when computers first started coming on, the like heyday when I was, in art school and stuff, learning about sound engineering and sound design, there was a real kind of optimism about the future of creativity. And some of that, I think, is just me being young and, not as cynical and all that stuff. But I think one thing that happened was, because it became easy, you basically had the two routes, and these two routes are basically like Rick Beato and Rick Rubin.
Yeah, I was wanting to get there.
Yeah, so this would be a great time to talk about it, because
I'm gonna turn off my heater. Go ahead.
You're good. So Rick Beato and Rick Rubin, basically, Rick Rubin goes the mystical, almost like apophatic route, where he's like, hey man, don't overthink it. I'm going to listen to this song as few times as possible, and when it feels good, it feels good. And I'm going to take things away, highly minimalistic. And then, for what it's worth, I'm more on the Rick Rubin side of things. But then Rick Beato is takes it of like, because you can do anything with a computer, the only thing that's valuable now is like physical mastery of an instrument, preferably the guitar, because he's Gen X. But so, like, I think that both of those routes, obviously, and I don't think Rubin would necessarily say this, but in some of the ways that he kind of has produced, he's kind of his own thing. I've got nothing but respect for Rick Rubin, even though I would critique some of the things, but most of it's just me being mad that he said a bunch of the stuff I was thinking before I, could make money off of it. So whatever. But yeah, so me and Rick Rubin, I guess, agree a lot on stuff. Like, gosh, how pretentious do I sound? Like, yeah, Rick Rubin doesn't even give a F about what I'm got going on. But yeah, so I kind of have been, I guess, since I started making music on my, like, for myself, on my own, away from the church, I kind of saw computer music as this like huge untapped potential, that there was like so much jazz, and there's so many, it's like an open world game. And I just felt like people were not, and still to this day, people are not taking advantage of it. And on one side of it is the people who make music, because they just want to make stuff that people like.
Yeah.
But then on the other side is the people who listen to music. And with Spotify, when I release an album, I'm competing with like Kendrick Lamar, Frank Sinatra, the Beatles,
everyone.
The best worship music of all time, like Amazing Grace. Are you going to listen to my bullshit music, or are you going to listen to Amazing Grace? And so there's a real sense in which, like, the dream of, like, the dream that Dirt Poor Robins has, figured out, basically, of that kind of independent, making music a career. It is not, it's like the hardest thing in the world to actually get that done. And the reason being is, like, you have to basically be a small business owner. You have to figure out the whole artistic process, which is from ideation to execution to presentation, meaning like, how do you present it to the public? And then you're not going to be good at all three of those things. And each of those things is like a lifetime's worth of craft to learn at all three of those stages. And so most artists are good at one or two. The best artists in the world are obviously good at pretty much all three. And then because they're so good, they have these massive, it's the Matthew principle, right? They have these massive teams of people who want to work with them for numerous reasons. Money, status, power,
Influence.
Diddy parties, the whole nine.
Diddy parties. I mean, it is true. I think one of the just my own personal struggles with like, I found out really quick how hard it actually was to do like multi-track recording with like traditional instrumentation is actually very hard. You know, as an independent person, like I can play drums, guitar, keyboard, bass, I can do a little bit of everything. And it's like, it's very hard to try to do that by yourself. And then to be good at one of those things, but that you have to get other people. But then like what you're saying, having the app, you can do things with digital sounds that are near infinite. And I sometimes all of that has crushed me. And so I think it takes a lot of courage to do what you've done, because I've been stifled and crushed by, it was one thing like, oh man, all this excitement it started out like, the songs that I've written, I'm excited to do this. And then over time, it became like when you could get the stems from everybody else. And it was just like, what am I even doing? Like that's, I feel like it kind of crushed me in that way. And so I think like it takes courage to get that out there, to do that. And, your own spin and be okay and fight to be okay with what you're doing, why you're doing it, and all those kinds of things. But let's talk about the album a little bit more before we like maybe do some Q&A. And
I don't know, Chris has a pretty good one there.
What did Chris say? Oh, here he's already doing it. But I mean, I do not have any
pretty backup singers. I'm the backup singer, so this is what you get. It's me all the way down. There's no features, except I did sample Sherry at one point. So for the TLC, the TLCers, if you listen through the album closely, you might hear Sherry, our very own Sherry of Grill Country.
I was going to ask you, like, what were your biggest influences? Music. I mean, you talked about philosophical influences, but what are your? I mean, obviously you're a huge Kendrick fan, but like, what else have you got?
Yeah, so I knew you were going to ask me this.
Come on. Have to. It's an album. It's an album release stream.
So in some senses, it's kind of like, it's a type of question that's so hard to answer because it's like every single person that I met or watched or heard about my whole entire life, before, during, and after the music, but in a real way, I guess, like maybe to be more biographical, to be more personal. I grew up listening. I mean, my earliest memory is listening to Vivaldi's Four Seasons on tape in the back of my dad's Ford truck, like sitting in a car seat, like as a 1-year-old, 1.5-year-old, something like that. And then as I got older, I had a lot of influences from gospel music, from like soul music. My mom really liked soul music, so like Marvin Gaye, Ike Tina Turner, like a whole lot of just like the classics basically. Hey, it's mostly
the classics, Tina Turner, and then classical music.
Yeah, just like soft rock basically. Anything that would get played on your local, like I think the radio station was 98.7 The River.
The River.
Your home for soft rock. We would listen to that on the way to school, and then there was also obviously like heavily influenced by Christian music. But then as soon as I kind of got a laptop when I was 18,
who were the Christian musics?
I mean, POD was my favorite band growing up. So, and still to this day, I'd say they're probably my favorite band.
That kids don't play, put it down in the streets till I see another day.
Make it out this time. Dude, I love that song. Don't play that. They'll definitely
I'm not.
get your ass for copyright if you do that.
Showing. I'm just showing the album on Spotify.
Okay. But yeah, like as soon as I kind of had the self-conception as an artist, I didn't really want my music to sound like anybody else. You know, I didn't want to kind of which in some ways is like a very like vain new kind of and now it's just me. Should I speaking of vain, hasn't left the body. The thorn in my side, my vanity. What was I saying? Got distracted. The weave was once again disrupted.
Sorry. Music.
Oh yeah, my influences. Yeah. So when I started making music, I did the thing where I was very comfortable being funny and kind of not standing behind the quality of the music and just kind of. So I did a lot of like, yeah. If you go to my SoundCloud, you could see some of the stuff I used to do, which is pretty funny. Thank you, Upcycle. But then I guess it's also, I should say, Kanye West is a huge influence. Sampling, like you kind of can't make computer music without kind of kudos to Kanye. Same thing with like Daft Punk, I think. And honestly, people like Rick Rubin and Rick Beato. Like it's kind of I tried to be a fairly astute observer of music, and you know, at sometimes, you know, more and sometimes less. But like I listen to new stuff that comes out. I really love hip hop. I really love still like soul music, like Otis Redding, you know, Luther Vandross. I'm drawing a blank on the other ones, but
that's a good list.
You know, like
list.
I'm the type of person who listens to a lot of music. So yeah, lots of influences, but then also trying my best to kind of not. I like hearing things I've never heard before. So my wife says I make video game music. So
I can guarantee you, for a lot of people, that if you go and check out McMosa's album McMosa, you'll hear something you've never heard before. So open up a tab on your browser and go search for his album on Spotify or Apple, whatever you've got, and start listening to it in the background while we're doing this.
Yeah.
Give it some plays, give it some spins, give him some positive feedback, some positive digital feedback for McMo.
Yeah, comment on the video. Actually, I don't know if you can comment on my video on my on the songs on YouTube. I think they turn off comments for the YouTube music, but I could look that up. I wish, you know, back in the day with SoundCloud, you can leave comments on songs on SoundCloud. And I wish Spotify would kind of like allow something like that, you know?
I think they're working towards stuff like that. They are trying to make it more interactive.
Yeah, like it would be cool if you were like, especially if you had like a membership type of thing, you know, where you were like a fan and that gave you the access to like basically like super chat on an album or a track. That would be pretty cool. Spotify, free idea. You can have that one. The rest of them are going to cost you.
Dude, so I was going to ask you, you kind of mentioned this, but when did you start making your own music? I was on Spotify. You've got a lot of stuff from 2020. Obviously, there was like this COVID. You just started like releasing all these singles during COVID.
Yeah, so that was all back catalog stuff too. Like that stuff I had made like as early as 2015, 2016, like before I was even married. A lot of that stuff. I've got a secret. So all of my singles, for the most part, the ones that are like that are worded as like phrases, there's a secret code there. I don't feel safe enough at this moment to tell you the secret code. I will say that it has something to do with Kierkegaard.
Easter egg.
It's an Easter egg. And, you know, in this present day and age, I think that somebody could probably figure it out. What I'm pointing at.
If you're a TLC philosophy nerd, go look at his singles on Spotify and see if you can crack the code.
Yeah. Chris, if you want your what does he say? His grandson or his nephew? I could tutor your nephew, give him some lessons if you want, for a small fee. Me and you can negotiate. We'll figure out some terms that are amiable to both sides. But yeah, I'd be happy to jump on a Zoom or he could just watch my, my Sunday chill streams. And, he's probably better than me though, in all honesty. Like he's probably better than me already. Like these kids these days, have you seen these kids who like grow up on iPads? Like they're just like with their fat little baby fingers. They could just navigate.
It is like, what does it mean? What does it mean to learn an instrument now? I think that's like people are playing drums on their drum machines, like it's really, what does it mean to learn drums? What does it mean to learn when you can do virtual instruments? What does it mean to learn bass and guitar? Like all that's a really probably the best would be to get good at a keyboard. If you're interested in digital music.
But see, that's the thing. I think so I was forced to take piano lessons. Which like in retro, it's one of those things like I didn't hate them. Like I didn't love them. I didn't hate them. I preferred sports, but I was like, I liked music too. And I was in the band. And so, but it was I could tell it was really important for my parents that I take the piano lessons. And then basically in high school, I couldn't do the sports I wanted to do. And I was at that point, I guess I was better at sports than I was at music, or at least that's what my parents thought. So they basically allowed me to kind of stop taking piano lessons and just go to football practice essentially. And, but I still played saxophone in the school band. So, in like the jazz band and stuff like that. And so I kind of took it for granted that I had just I just built these musical chops, it was kind of, it didn't seem that different for me to like memorizing Bible verses and, studying for tests and, exercise, like lifting weights for football. It was all kind of, it all felt like the same thing, but then when I got to college, I found a piano my parents actually found a piano on the side of the road and they like got it and they gave it to me for Christmas. They didn't have to spend any money on it, but they were like, here's the stand-up piano. And that thing, it was in retrospect, it was a blessing of God. That thing was tuned like perfectly. I think somebody had tuned it by ear or somebody had tuned it. It was like a miracle because we moved that thing, like took it in a truck with like, barely a blanket covering it, like, 15 miles to my house and then like up a flight of stairs and all around. And we got it in our little sunroom, me and my roommates, and we just like pressed down the first chord and it was perfect. We couldn't believe it, how good that thing sounded. Yep. And so I kind of fell back in love with piano and I figured out like how to read chord music basically. So I could
power chord piano. That's what I
did. Yeah. And I started learning what like sevenths were and ninths were. And that was like a huge learning curve for me. Like I was like, why does jazz sound so cool? And then I would like try to do it. And I was like, but that sounds bad. That dissonance. Like I literally as a white person had to figure out like how, jazz chords worked. So yeah, I was like, I ended up being grateful for that, but I don't think if it, like I go back and forth, like if me and my wife have kids, Lord willing in the future, the extent to which, I'm not expecting them to necessarily have the desire or the capacity to take piano lessons and play sports and, find an instrument that they like best. For me, it was like, I just loved having an instrument in my hand. I loved making noises. If I didn't have an instrument, I would be making noises with my mouth. The kids call it stimming now, but I was just an annoying dude, and I would beatbox for my, annoy my sister. And I would try to, throat sing. As soon as I found out about throat singing in high school, it was over, the I don't know if that translates, but I'm hearing two different notes over here.
Have you seen Snarky Puppy before?
Oh yeah.
And they've got this girl that sings on one of their, it's an older video now. It's like almost 10 years old, but
yeah.
And she's like doing harmony with herself on it and stuff. It's killer.
Oh yeah. I tried to do that for like a whole summer. That was like the same summer I taught myself how to juggle.
The things you don't know about McMo coming out.
I can juggle.
Yours truly.
Yeah.
So what I want to try to do is if we have some people out there listening, show some love. I want you to think about some questions you might have for McMo about his album, anything you want. We're going to take a small break and think about your questions. We're going to play that song again. It's the copyright free song. And yeah, just think about it and have some questions after this comes up.
And I want to run to the potty.
Follow my boots full of life and love and strength and courage. I don't have to worry. Hey, why don't we try making a baby? We can do it all by ourselves. I can be a bad boy and you be a good girl. You know, beautiful. I think I'm done with baby. I think I'm playing myself out. You stood strong, and I got to know I'd like to say right away that I might have been wrong. Yeah, I'm just done with baby. They just don't do much hell. It's harder to guess the fact you, but they fall and move the view. I can't really trust these babies. I only trust myself. What could those cherubs know that I don't know? Well, their thinking is oh so squishy with no room to grow. I don't believe babies. I can't recall myself. All the words I know are left and grow. All the others that follow only been shown.
All right. McMo is getting back from the restroom. There he is. Let's see.
I'm
We got
back.
some questions. Do we have any questions? Put them in the chat. Put them in the chat. Okay, here's one from Neil. I completely forget where the McMosive name comes from.
It's a
Let's get some
secret,
more-
but
a
it's an
se-
open secret. It's plain to all, but only a few see and understand.
For those with eyes to see. Come on, let's get some questions out here. If anyone's still hanging with us, it says there are people here hanging with us. What are some questions for McMo about his album? Bring
Or a
them in.
declarative statement. I'd be happy to engage with any type of phrase or sentence.
Here's one. Flevis mentioned this earlier, and I don't know if exactly what he's talking about, but he said, does everything got to be social media? And I think that you were talking about music coming out. You could hit on that. Questions for
Yeah.
McMo.
Does everything have to be social media? No, absolutely not. Like I thought about talking about this. Like in a large way, like you can see the two strains of music in at least Western musical history as folk music and religious music. And even in like, you know, what do they call them? Hunter gatherers or, you know, First Nations or, you know, third world. We have all these names for people who don't live in the urban monoculture, right? But like, you know, even other cultures religiously, you know, you'll have like religious music versus secular music or folk music is usually what they call it. So like in a lot of ways, I think of myself more as a folk musician than a religious musician. And those lines obviously get blurred. But my point being is that like, no, fundamentally, I don't want to be a quote unquote social media artist. I think that most artists of any type these days feel like in order to be an artist, you have to have social media. You have to promote yourself. Um, you have to engage with fans. And I'm like, yes, if you want to be successful, but that wasn't my mandate. My mandate was to make this stuff.
I
So
would also say that that's the difference between like, you know, like what you and Matt Hylam like doing everything in the box yourself. What that means is like you're producing everything. You're not a band trying to go like, well, for us to get together, and you can do some of that on social media, but what does that translate to like getting people together when it's just like you and the box, like with what he's talking about? Can we just be music pure? Would interaction improve the scene? I think that there is some truth to that. Like President Foxman had a great video on with Montel Fish, and that he released. And then I watched another one about indie music scenes that like the kids these days are like, they'll kind of shame each other. They didn't say this, but like if someone's putting up a phone, it's like, no, be here. Like there's some truth to all that happening.
I mean, to specifically kind of rebuke Phlebas, not really, not a level of rebuke, but just a small disagreement in the way I see it. I think that kind of approach is, it's not mandatory that you participate in the comment section of Spotify. You could turn the screen off and just listen. You could do that with this podcast. You don't have to participate in the comments, right? But the option is there for those who want to do it. And then also, I think that just like on the level of net gain to humanity, I still think that like the people who say social media is a net negative are on the back foot for a lot of reasons. Usually because they're saying it on social media, or else I wouldn't hear them. If I hear somebody in my real life who's not on their phone say that social media is ruining society, I'm like, you're probably right. But when somebody on X or on YouTube is like, this whole social media thing is ruining the best of things, it's like, no, not at all. Like, there's so much value added, is the lame corporate way of putting it, but it's a good phrase. There's so much value added to the kind of secondary media revolving around. Like, I'm so glad that there are people who have commented on Kierkegaard's work. Now, I have big disagreements with almost all of them because I, am a smarty pants and I have my own opinions. But like, at the end of the day, I'm better for the fact that there are people who loved Kierkegaard's work enough to engage with it publicly. And so like, I think that I'm also thankful for people who like engage with Kendrick Lamar's work. And, all of our I'm sure if you haven't found a YouTube video that's kind of talking about another work of art in a way that's beautiful and makes you think, then like you gotta find that side of YouTube, I guess. But yeah, I think the social media thing, like aspect of things, is on the whole like a net good. But I think it should still be like, that's what I'm excited about most. I think about this go around was that I think I really cracked a code in terms of like the juice was not in, me uploading to Spotify a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, and, crossing my fingers that the samples would get clear and, hoping that, there would be no hiccups with the mastering. And of course there were things that, like, listening to it today, I was like, oh, I wish I would have changed that. I didn't like the way that it sounds in the car, or like, I didn't spend as much time as I would have spent with this album had somebody hired me to master it. I just kind of like trusted my gut. So, yeah, in one sense, like I'm trying to push against the kind of like polished profilicity that I think social media and the internet pushes us towards, kind of or maybe a certain type of person very easily. But then I'm also trying to say like, we are creatures of the internet. So I'm going to use my computer. I'm going to use sounds that, I'm going to have I'm going to use vaporwave tropes, maybe this gets into Jeremy's question too.
Yeah. Let's pull Jeremy's up. I know you mentioned taking a postmodern approach, but are there still some structures that you work within? Do you do anything with polyrhythms or atonal work? I would say
yes. So I would say I have done a lot of stuff with polyrhythms and atonal work, um, as exercises or experiments. Um, I've made math rock songs. I've made songs in 5/4. I've done, like you said, I've done both atonal and
Melodic.
yeah, polyrhythm stuff. And um, in general, I think it's kind of like learning the piano. Like, it's good to learn your scales. It's good as a musician in the 21st century to know about atonality, to know about polyrhythms, to know about math rock, to know about prog rock, to know about the avant-garde, to know about Zappa, to know what he's doing, to know free jazz and modal music. Like, yes, I very much in the style of Picasso, I have always felt that I needed to justify my aesthetic preferences by knowing the quote unquote right way to do things. And so in a large part, like I felt this probably more so with my last album, because it was the first one I was ever gonna like release that had my voice singing on it. I really felt like there was a lot of self-negotiation that had to take place, where I was like, yes, I know that this isn't like polished and clean. Yes, I still like it. Maybe I'm being lazy and, justifying something. But then also at the end of the day, I felt called to, or compelled, whichever way you want to put it, to release it as it was. And there's specifically songs on my first album where I was like, there's one song, and it's called Art Sucks, where I basically tried to make so when you're making a piece of art, you're met with all of these tiny decisions, basically an infinity of decisions. And so you basically, if you're a painter, you have to say this color, that color, right here, right there, this shape, that shape. For a musician, it's tempo, this key, this chord progression, this melody, this, and so on and so on and so on. And so I did one song where I tried to I asked myself, what does my gut want to do here? And then I basically did the opposite of that. And just as an experiment kind of a thing. And so most of my music like that kind of starts out as an experiment. And sometimes that's, let me see if I can make a atonal fugue, for instance, or let's see if I can find a chord progression that I can't pick, or I can't think of a song immediately that goes to that chord progression. What would it sound like for the drums to be in 7/8 and the melody, the instruments, musical instruments, the harmonic information to all be in 4/4? Like, and so yeah, a lot of times in my process, that's how a song will start. But I will say that for the most part, that kind of way of making music, where I kind of have some sort of musical theory idea that I'm trying to like massage or exemplify, or I can't think of a better word. There is one, but it's not coming to mind. But that's the kind of the thing that normally does not get the juices flowing. That's the type of instrumental beat that, like, the next day I don't like the sound of it and no words come, like pagans would call it. The muses don't come with that one. Or I would say, like, the spirit's not in that one. The Lord is saying not yet, or that one's just for me, like, you don't need to share that with the world, so yeah, like, I do, there's a lot of structures, and there's a lot of but that's what I mean by, maybe postmodern is not the best, but more of like a meta modern, because it's not postmodern, because a lot of postmodernist music is minimalism, and I'm very much a maximalist, and not to say that I can't do the minimal thing, but it's more fun to be a maximalist.
I think most is pretty great. Let's hit Chris's that was from Matthew Parlato. Let's hit Chris's question. Some computer music is heavy on rhythm and lyrics, sound sampling, but they don't seem to do much with volume or velocity changes.
Yeah.
I would say dynamics. Is that because of the tools? Is it the aim of danceability?
Yeah, it's a lack of creativity, for one. It's also the kind of thing where, like, dynamics come very easily to acoustic instruments. Like, one of the biggest knobs you have if you're playing guitar, for instance, like acoustic guitar around a campfire, is you can play something really quiet and you can have everybody lean in, and then you can strum real hard and it's going to be very loud. It's going to ring out. And so when you're making digital music, the tricks are a little different. And that kind of like volume change it happens a lot faster, I would say, is one way to look at it. So, but then the other thing that, and this is kind of like a result of streaming, of the digital tools, is we had a thing called the loudness wars. And so there's an idea that kind of, just like if if you're McDonald's, you put sugar. I'm not saying McDonald's does this. I don't want I don't want yours truly to get taken down or anything. But like you can imagine, there was conspiracy theories about like they put sugar in everything, right? And so like that's what makes everything taste better, is you just put sugar and salt in it, and everybody will like it. And so that's kind of how I see like making things as loud as possible. It is kind of fun as like you can imagine guys who once human beings started making engines, they were like, well, let's see how fast we can make this thing. And so there is a kind of like version and a skill to kind of getting it to be as loud as it possibly can be. And this isn't just, I wouldn't lay this just at the feet of electronic music, because you can look back at like a Red Hot Chili Peppers album. Honestly, you could look back at a lot of Rick Rubin stuff. He was kind of the predecessor to this because he took so much things out. And so that meant that the less things got pushed way forward to the center. So there was more clarity. It was more loud. But yeah, it was things like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. There's some albums that they have that are just like so loud. And a lot of this too is like 90s and the evolution of speaker systems. And you wanting to have something that's going to rattle your whole car. Like, so yeah, it was a not multivalent. There was a lot of contributing factors to that lack of dynamics. Especially if you go back and listen to like jazz or classical music, that's where you're gonna get your dynamics. In a lot of ways, just dynamics have kind of fallen out of style unless you're doing something that's like pure acoustic. But when you're mixing and mastering, it's kind of like high definition, right? Like if a movie is like blurry the whole time, it's gonna be hard to say that like, that was I'm glad that movie was, most of the scenes were blurry. If there's one blurry scene, you might notice it. But yeah, so that there's a lot that goes into that. But that's a really good question, I think.
It is. And that part of that was for radio, like what's going to it's about attention, so like loud.
Well, the commercials, if you watch TV still, God help you. If you watch regular TV that they just do ads every 30 seconds, you can tell that there's a huge volume difference. It's not actual, it's perceived. But you'll be watching a show and then, something, it'll cut off or it'll fade out. And then you'll get this extremely loud, happy jingle. Talk to your doctor about Alvenzatron or whatever it's called. Like the alien language that all the pills are made out of now. So yeah, like that's when I first learned about loudness, because I realized as a young child that they were somehow, it was the same speakers at the same volume, but the commercials were louder than the show. And so yeah, it's a technical marvel. It's compression, it's limiting, it's EQ, it's a whole lot of stuff.
It is.
Hello, Tony.
All the things for attention. What it's making me think of was thumbnails. Like exactly. How like that's, obviously I pay attention to some of that stuff as I'm continuing this YouTube journey, and it's like that's that same principle. It's like, why are they so loud? Why are the expressions so extreme? It's like because that's what you're trying to. You only have a moment to capture somebody. Here's one from Upcycle. Were you into Aphex Twins electronic music at some point in time?
Yeah, Aphex Twins. So I would say no. I was never like into them as a fan. I learned about them as a like academically in school and like trying to master my craft. I listened to some Aphex Twins, but then there was also a sense in which a lot of times with certain artists, and I felt this about Radiohead as well, where I would listen to a song or two and just kind of feel like, I don't know if I'm quite ready to take that in yet. And so I know I'm going to at some point listen to all of Radiohead, probably on a long car trip or something, and just listen to album after album. And so Aphex Twins was one of those for me, where I was kind of like, I see why they're important, but I'm not going to necessarily, listen to their every album that they've done. And maybe one day I will.
Mark Parker says, "Congratulations, McMo, for accomplishing this so monumental an achievement."
I think the more monumental achievement that I accomplished was actually meeting with Mark D. Parker at a park in Southern California and living to tell the tale. Because you know how those three named people, Mark D. Parker, is a serial killer, Mark D. Parker. I had to visit him in an undisclosed location, but I lived to tell the tale, and I'm glad we did. Good to see President Foxman.
Yeah, we did a shout out to Foxman. We've done a few shout outs on some of the creative and musical endeavors from this space we've bumped into. Yeah, man. Well, how you feel if we invite some people in for some conversation? You up for that?
The more the merrier. Let's let them in.
Let's see if anybody is can sneak away and come hang out for a little bit. We can do some hangs. He's okay. We got one here. We've got from Maxwell Bliss. I really like Mystics, Histrionics. What was the inspiration behind it? And that was that one was also on my list. Because I like the melodies. So whenever you bring in some melodies, it's gonna capture me. So
now I got to remember the melody from Histrionics. That's the one that's like, don't have to go back to where you came from. Okay, yeah. The original idea for that song was actually the first line of the song, which is "Hey," which is it's kind of cringy to start off a verse or a chorus with "Hey," but hey, you don't have to go back to where you came from. And I thought of that and I wrote that because I had a lot of friends who were like considering moving away from home, moving back to home, and I was kind of just I was thinking about that and I was like, it's your life. You can go away and you don't ever have to come back. And as like a thing of, kind of like Abraham, you can leave your father and mother and you can go on an adventure and what happens. But and there's also a cost to it. And then there was also at the time, there was like people who were kind of like, there had been people who left for various reasons, they had left on bad terms. They had left on good terms. Like I was just very cognizant of this idea of like leaving and just kind of going away for various reasons. But all I had was that kind of that phrase, like, hey, you don't have to go back to where you came from. As a matter of fact, if you left today, it might just change something. I can't remember the lyrics. I'm not a lyrics guy, even though I write them sometimes. But then it kind of sat on the shelf for like a year and a half or 2 years. And I just had maybe not 2 years, year and a half to a year. But I had this beat that I really liked. And so I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 months ago now. It was before the hurricane. I think it was like beginning of summer, maybe midsummer. The rest of the lyrics kind of came to me. I was sitting in my backyard and they just kind of all fell out at once, kind of a thing. And so, when that happens, I just go inside. Hopefully my wife's not home, so I don't feel embarrassed. But if she is, I just kind of have to suck it up and make weird noises in the room, Honestly, talking about theology and philosophy is only a slight, a slight uptick in embarrassment in terms of my wife being in the other room listening. But yeah, so that, I guess that was the kind of, and then that was one of the songs I think that was probably most heavily influenced by my time in TLC, I guess, just in the sense of, just kind of the Be Not Afraid part was really what I think kind of like made it so that I had to record those lyrics, because I just I really liked the way that I felt that beat was kind of saying, be not afraid. And to be honest, I was thinking a lot about Jonathan Dumire when I was making the song. And so he was the first person I sent it to. Which he's gotten a couple of my the first things I send to, the first time I send something to someone, sometimes it's Jonathan Dumire, at least in the YouTube space. But yeah, so I guess that's it. But the inspiration question is always really tricky because in a lot of ways it's kind of like I'm not a pagan. I don't believe in the muses, but it feels weird to be like, the Holy Spirit brought me the those words,
It is, yeah. That it's big words. I think it's interesting, like because you've mentioned several times, like that song says mystics, histrionics, and then kind of the conversation around orthodoxy in this space and American orthodoxy and like what's happening, at least in this kind of space, is like, I know you're not going anywhere. You've made that abundantly clear. And
I want to. God won't let me.
maybe I feel the same way, or something close to that. But similar, like I don't know if I want to, but that
I just mean I want to go back to church, but I was gonna do it. I had a plan, and then old Hurricane Helene came through and literally blocked the highway between me and the church I was gonna go to. So
for that week at least.
For that week, but I mean, I don't like. I take the signs as I take the signs. Like an act of God came between me and going to church. I think that was a loud and clear one for me as to what that meant. At least, I don't know if they weren't ready for me or if I'm not ready for them, but
well, I really like
you know.
the beat vocal tone on Mystics Histrionics. This is from Maxwell Bliss. A good portion of the album's vocal tone reminded me of Kanye's dark fantasy album,
Wow.
especially on this one. Cool.
High praise. Thank you, Maxwell.
Yeah. I don't know Maxwell. Do you know Maxwell?
I don't think I may have talked to him on a stream before, but I've seen him in the comments a lot.
Yeah, I think I've seen some comments.
Yeah, and we've interacted on the comments before a lot.
Uh-oh, here we go. Do you think Kendrick's surprise dropped as an attempt to pull attention away from your album?
Yes, absolutely.
Talk about signs.
Yeah, Kendrick, he
called you up and he said, "I'm doing this."
Yeah. Yeah. Kendrick wanted beef with me, but I turned the other cheek, and so that's when he started going after Drake.
That's
no, but I mean, I uploaded my album like 2 weeks ago or something like that, and then Kendrick surprise drops last Friday, and I was like, oh my goodness, I planned this perfectly. Like,
here's something I want to ask you, because this came up a long time ago whenever we did a conversation with Chad, and I in this space I've found tension here, which I think you understand this. It's like we are not scared to discuss, and this is what Parlato's and Foxman's like comments make me think of. Is we don't have any problems like discussing people at length, like whether it's thinky talky philosophy people, rock stars or rap stars, but if we as individuals try to do that or do certain things that it would take to do that, it almost seems like you're sold out to something.
You mean like do stuff to gain the type of notoriety that would have random podcasts talking about you behind your back?
Yeah, in a sense, because don't we get off on talking about it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there is like a social aspect of like everybody in the lunchroom's talking about the cool kids table. Like that just kind of happens. And maybe there's disagreements about who's actually a part of the cool kids table or which table is the cool kids table. Like, there's plenty of variance, but yeah, I think that in general, like fame and fortune are huge obstacles towards the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of God. And they come with lots of downfalls and pitfalls. At the same time, I do think that people, and I'll include myself, should be much more careful about how we talk about people, even if they are famous. Like, it's not like they stopped bearing the image of God because, they have 1 billion followers on Instagram or whatever. They're still children of God. They still, by rights, by the right of them being children of God, they deserve our love. And therefore they deserve us to, hope all things, to endure all things, to, you know, and so yeah, like I think oftentimes we see influential people, maybe influential better than popular, just because like there's plenty of people that are popular that aren't necessarily influential, and I don't think we talk about those type of people very often. Like I haven't heard many people talking about like Destiny, for instance, in TLC, which who knows why, and it's not like we spend a lot of time talking about Andrew Tate either, other than just kind of a caricature. I thought that said Drake for a second. Hey, Drew.
It happened.
I was like, what if Drake was watching? How crazy would that be? But yeah, I don't, the whole thing about, I think it's probably better to just do what you want to do and not really think about gaining followers or gaining fame, unless you kind of already have a plan of like what you want to do with that attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've got a plan for that attention that you're gathering and you're gobbling up, that goes beyond just like, the McMo show or the Seaback show. If your telos is something like conversation craft or having meaningful conversations, or or even like Soli Deo Gloria, that would probably be even better. But I realize, it's a secret, but it's an open secret. It's plain to all, but only few see and understand. So yeah, and beyond that, only the universalist shall be saved. But in regards to popularity and significance, that's kind of one of the prices you pay, is that like the more popular and significant you are, the more people talk about you. And I think you just kind of have to take that.
Well, this is taking the conversation to a whole nother level. Away from the album, Andrew Tate, and I'm not the first to say this. What is masculinity is to 14-year-old boys? Oh, I guess that's just a statement.
You're definitely not the first to say it, because you didn't even say it. You typed it, brother.
But Bastista's Law. Thanks for hanging. Let's see, Brian. Marv over here is trying to introduce seizure from me from these changes.
LOL. Does Brian know my deep lore about one of my nicknames in high school and middle school being Marv, because I looked like Marv from Home Alone? The Sticky Bandits. Yeah, that was my nickname in basketball. Maybe Brian Ortiz is like maybe he knows my government name.
Well, I'm going to give one more call if anyone wants to hang out for a few minutes. I've got the link up pinned in the YouTube chat. We have, it seems like, more people watching over on X than, so if you want to come hang out, hop over to YouTube.
Dang, we got the X crew.
Yeah. And
the expats.
Yeah, the expats.
We got any expatriates? They're going to start calling themselves that on X, I bet.
Binding with and to the highest.
Somebody had a question. Oh, yeah. Parlato had a question about Drake's. I don't think the defamation lawsuit holds water, but his lawsuit against UMG is most likely not going to be about defamation. It's probably going to be about breach of contract or unfair business practices. But the problem is he's kind of doing a thing where it's like, you remember that moment when Hillary and Trump were on stage and Hillary goes like, he uses tax fraud. He's got all these tricks to get outside of taxes. And Trump's like, I do. And I know, who else does? Everybody who donates to Hillary Clinton. I know the tricks, and so I think that's kind of what
in
Drake's
that moment,
doing.
A star was born, according to Dave Chappelle.
And so that's what Drake's doing. He's kind of like, yeah, Kendrick is doing payola, and I know that UMG is promoting Kendrick's album over mine and buying all of these botted streams. And see, here's the thing. He's probably right. But the other thing is, he's only right because he knows they're doing that because they did it for him for like 15 years. But what's sad is he thinks that like, because UMG told him that it's like, oh yeah, we're going to make sure that all of these bots, this is a sure win. It's, you're guaranteed at least like, gold, going gold. Maybe, maybe if it goes well, it'll go platinum. But the thing is, it's like, once it becomes competitive, then it's a matter of excellency. And people, once you're in the Coliseum, once you're, the weapons are drawn,
things get real at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how how much money is made off of the line, and how much promotion was done beforehand. If you're in the ring with somebody who wants to do you harm, it doesn't matter how much money y'all are making on the back end. They're gonna try to do as much harm as possible. So that was the situation I think Drake found himself in. And so in a lot of ways, I think that the legal action is just kind of him trying to claw back a pretty massive reputation hit that he basically did to himself.
This we've got from Estista's Law. Do you guys have a theory or philosophy of church music? And like, what is the purpose of church music?
The first one is yes, I think I do. Would I be able to expound upon it cogently in this moment? Probably not. But like, what is the purpose of church music? That one's kind of easy, I guess, to give the Sunday school answer, which is soli Deo Gloria. It's for the glory of God. It's for the worship of God. It is to glorify God by using the gifts he has given us out of love to love him back, basically. To give to him, and we've lost Seabax. So now I guess you guys are just going to get the full double barrel best of McMo on the fly, trying to give some sort of theology and philosophy of worship music specifically, or church music specifically. So yeah, there's the element of wanting to, God gives us gifts. We want to use those gifts to his glory. There's also the specific commands given by God to worship him with the sound of the trumpet, to worship him with the lyre, to sing a new song unto the Lord. But then once you get into the different churches and denominations, different opinions on things, that's when, and I can't remember the exact words for this, forgive me. This was like, a long time ago when I was interested in this stuff, and interested in the nerdy distinctions of this stuff, I should say. There's one distinction basically between the high church and the low church. Maybe it's like normative versus prescriptive, or something like that. Where is what's allowed in worship only that which is explicitly said is allowed in worship, or explicitly should we only do what is explicitly commanded in liturgy or in worship, or should we basically have the freedom to do anything that is not explicitly forbidden, right? And so that's the kind of Protestant view of the question, because in no small way, the Protestants have already kind of thrown out tradition as the kind of rock solid fallback. No matter, tradition does not hold as big of a sway for Protestants. There he is. He's back.
My camera died.
Happens to the best of us, brother. Yeah. Mark Parker. He's in the. Hey. There he is. You look good in a turtleneck, brother.
Oh, thanks. It's cold, man. I've been cold all day. It's only like 60 degrees out, so it's California. We're not used to it.
Freezing.
But anyway,
that's also, a man of your experience will say. That tends to be the case.
Was I being mocked for saying congratulations for?
No, I was being false humble. I appreciate you saying it.
I think creating an album is pretty monumental by my standards.
Definitely.
So.
Well, listen to it first.
I will. I got it.
Maybe you'll think it was a giant mistake after you listen to it.
It's also on YouTube Music, by the way. I was looking around for it. It took me a while to figure out where to find it.
It's on all the streaming platforms, pretty much.
Very cool.
Yeah.
On Christian music, there's a documentary on YouTube, at least parts of it are on YouTube, and it goes through the various phases of the origins of contemporary Christian music. And at some point when it hits like the 80s, I couldn't get past the cringe. And so much, there's something, because I don't know what happened. So my question to you guys is, can can quote unquote, because when somebody asked about church music, can Christian popular contemporary music be saved from itself and
Yes, of course.
redeemed, made something really wonderful?
Yes, yes, of course.
Go.
I think that there,
Let's hear
I don't
it.
think that there's very few things under the sun that can't be redeemed, right? And it'd be far be it for me to say that something can't be redeemed. But I think that, so I wasn't alive in the 80s, so I've got no firsthand experience here. But something that I think is Steve Burns, the guy from the Talking Heads, he wrote a really good book on music, and he kind of spends
Okay.
a lot of time pointing at the way in which music almost always fits a particular arena, John Vervaeke would say, but that's also the perfect word, because I think what happened with Christian music is that the genre of the arena kind of became the standard. And that's why in the secular world, the first band to really nail this was U2. They were the first kind of arena show that kind of got the arena sound, and all the way down to the songwriting. These songs hit in an arena. Like listening to Joshua Tree in your earbuds is one thing, but I'm sure, being in that Vegas sphere with those old dudes playing, Where the Streets Have No Name I'm sure is a transcendent experience. And so that's why I think for pretty much my whole lifetime, all Protestant worship music, for the most part, I should caveat, white Protestant megachurch evangelical music has basically just been elaborations on U2. I think that there are some stunning standouts. Regrettably, most of them are connected in some way to Mars Hill and Mark Driscoll. But artistically, I think that Mars Hill actually really figured out something in regards to excellence in Christian music.
It's not about a lack of it. It's almost like the excellence. They increase the polish over time, and there's a couple moments. And YouTube, it's funny you brought up YouTube, because when I was young, I loved Joshua Tree. I was, when it dropped, it was like amazing. And now I find them barely listenable, and it just hasn't aged well for me. Now maybe for it could be really meaningful for people who, and maybe it's new to some people. Just for something, it didn't age well. But then there's the thing that really, I guess, the cringe hit when I'm watching this documentary, and it showed some of Amy Grant's transition. And there's this, I don't know if it's an album cover or some photo of her on stage where she's all backlit, wearing some kind of military cap and some kind of rock and roll pose, arms outstretched, looking kind of sexy, kind of artsy, kind of hip. And to me, it was just, that's the cringe. It's almost like the polish. The YouTube that really endures for me is War. It's the really early stuff.
Yeah.
Joshua Tree is still a solid album, but I could do with a lot less Daniel Lanois.
I think Sunday Bloody Sunday is probably my favorite U2 song, but I don't remember what album that's on. I'm not the biggest U2 fan. I just know that kind of worship music was taken over by that YouTube style, or U2. But yeah, I see what you're saying. I think some of the cringe can be laid at the feet of the kind of naive attempt by some evangelicals to truly be all things to all people, and
I would say,
in some ways
that's the charitable take. But the other one,
I'm steel man in here. I'm always trying to steel man Protestants. The Protestants get the most shit in this little corner of the internet than anybody. We even got a Protestant worship pastor in Seabax, and he's constantly just brown nosing to the Orthodox and Catholics.
You guys are the ultimate panel for my question. So in the corner, you guys would probably. This is it. You guys know what you're talking about.
I think that the other thing so I honestly think that the cringe is like, and I was actually thinking about this, my parents still go to the mega church that I was fired from. And some of my best friends in the world are still friends with the people who were responsible for me being fired. And so they're, it's sloppy, it's messy, but that's not the point. The point is, oh gosh, I totally lost the thread. Brought up my personal life, and now the thread is completely gone.
I'll take over.
The cringe. No, I remember. Don't take over, Christian. This is my stream now, buddy.
All right.
No, I'm just kidding. I think it has to do with there being a lot of sincerity and a lot of profilicity. And, and I was about to raise the middle finger, but not a lot of authenticity, right? There was not a lot of real, and so I guess, you know, even to narcissistically put it back on my music is like, I'm trying my best to sincerely use profilicity to undermine my own authenticity in some small way, right? Like that there's a playing around with doing things messy on purpose for the purposes of including the most amount of people. So like one of the things that Grim Grizz said was like he appreciated having bad, quote unquote, bad branding so that more people felt like, oh, I could get involved in that. And I think that that's true of the church too. Like I think that I've often talked about this in terms of like, you know, God puts all of our art on his infinitely large refrigerator. And it's not because it's all like value, you know, it's not like all the Sistine Chapel by any means, but God's got an eternal infinite refrigerator. You know, he made each one of us, and he knows the hairs on our head. So I think he's like completely stoked when we attempt at creating, you know, at sub creating, you could even call it. But I think that so often with worship music and with the cringe that you're talking about, it's not the type of thing that's kind of coming from a sincere place of receptivity to the Spirit and sacrifice to the body. I think that it's coming from a real place of I think that they are trying to use their skills and what God's been given, what God has gifted them. But once you start talking about doing things for large amounts of people, you have to polish and polish and polish. And that's where and I can't remember who said this recently in a completely different avenue, but it's like pornography, right? Beauty becomes smoothness.
That's true.
Yeah, and so I think that is exactly what happened with not just worship music, but pop music and hip hop and a whole lot of genres where beauty became smoothness, and it basically became a race to the bottom to who could create the most smooth thing. And it's left, you know, in its wake, it's left a lot of conservatives kind of thinking that the height of beauty was like Pam Anderson in Baywatch. You know, instead of it being like Saint Anne of Clairvaux or something, you know, or you know, God forbid, God forgive me for bringing her up in this conversation, but Mary, the mother of God, like I think that in a way we've kind of, you know, is that a losing of our bearings or something? That there's a certain type of conservative person that would think that we're on the right track if they started seeing more cleavage in the Super Bowl ads or something. You know, like that's to me is the same type of cringe that you're talking about with Amy Grant, but that may have not as been as successful of a weave as I thought it was.
I mean, I think there's a lot there, but I think the other piece is just as those people as individuals are asking they're not asking a question of art, they're asking a question of career at that point. And so I don't fault people for one, you know, okay, well, your demographic reach in 1987, Amy Grant in the Christian music market has a cap. But you know, there's a lot of people that like your single on the pop radio that were not like really getting to. And it's like, well, what do you want to do for your career as a musician? Like, not what is artistically the right move here. And I think that that's for so many people because even for you too. I mean, they've probably gone up and down on this ladder a ton of times on, am I doing this for art or is this the best career move? You know, just to use them as one example, but for everybody, you get to that point and it's easy to cast judgment on it. But that, you know, because those are they're thinking about the same thing many people are thinking about. They're thinking about retirement. They're thinking about their kids' college and they're, you know, like, or whatever, you know, on that level in Christian music at that time still. But to the point of the cringe, like what's also different, what happened in Christian music was people like Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, Stephen Curtis Chapman, the people that were at the top of that Christian radio game in the late 80s, early 90s, they were making songs about God. They weren't worship songs. They were telling stories. It was more like either pop or country music.
But
And
Christian, our children's choir sang "Diving In" in a Sunday service.
that's late Stephen Curtis. That's like new Stephen Curtis Chapman. But I think the thing about that too is that so then you can see the transition happen with the modern worship music that took hold basically in the mid to late 90s from the young people passion. And when they are filling arenas again. And to Big Mo's point about what happened was Christian worship music took the notes from arena rock and they started to figure that out, all the millennials, and they ran with it. They weren't trying to tell stories about God. They were singing songs to God. And when that happened, you saw Michael W. Smith release a worship album in the late 90s. And it got really big. Like it was also a career move, but I think it was probably related to something like he was probably tired of singing Christian songs. And I think he probably saw something, because at the same time he planted a church in Nashville around that. He was trying to do something different. He saw something like a move there. And so there's a lot going on there that we can diagnose culturally, but also I think for the person and the individual, that there's a lot of other things going on in their mind. And I think you have to ask, because like I have a friend who used to play music with me, and he's always been career motivated. Like, I want to be a professional drummer, but he's been he's done stuff in and out of the Christian music industry, but he is a true professional, but he's with a big Christian rock act right now. And I think that for him, this is still just like, he's asking the question. He's going to continue to ask the question of career.
Who knows? Maybe he's the drummer of Sleep Token.
I don't think so.
One thing that I think I agree with everything you just said, Christian. I think that one thing that was standing out to me was how like everything that you said applies 100% to the white evangelical Christian music, but the black church has basically always had and continues to have the best musicians in the world. And like Snarky Puppy, you brought up Snarky Puppy earlier. Like to a T, almost every single one of their rhythm players, like some of my favorite songs, like Lingus or whatever. You've got Corey Henry on the keys. I can't remember the drummer's name, and then you've got the bassist. And in order to be a legitimate musician these days, like especially jazz or any type of music that's good, you have to be at least somewhat familiar with the black church musicianship, at least to the point where you understand that if you're ever in a recording session with somebody who's a black church musician, that they deserve your deference. Like that is kind of like the samurai of musicians. And that goes for secular and, religious musicians. But yeah, the type of corniness I think too is also like, I wonder to what degree that's just kind of like, hey man, that was the 90s, like they were wearing mom jeans, and the backwards hats, like, well, now I feel like I'm making fun of Christian. I didn't even mean that. I'm sorry, bud.
That was the early 2000s. That was
backwards
the early
hats are still cool for sure. You know what? I'll join you.
That was the early 2000s wearing girl jeans. Come on, dude. You're like,
yeah. Well, I was just thinking about my mom's mom jeans in the 90s, but yeah, the skinny jeans of the early 2000s, that's a whole nother thing. That was a line too far for my dad, I think, in church. He was like, why is our worship pastor got them skinny jeans on?
Oh, I could tell stories. On all of that. How deep the V-neck was going at the church camp, getting evaluated on
yeah, bro, that's immodest. I would have, as a sound guy, I would have called you out on that.
Yeah, man. The idea of that change and the cringe. I would say the other piece of it is evangelical culture in the 80s and 90s, Jesus music, but even to the pop. Like I was only allowed to listen. That was the only music I was allowed to listen to, Mark, I was born in 85, came out of the womb hearing people like Steve Green and Amy Grant and Sandy Patty, and like I don't know, you may recognize some of those names, but like
Sandy Patty.
that's who I came out of the womb listening to, and so like there's also a part of me, you know, McMo talked about the self-hating or the self-hating part, but it's also like I have to accept like that form that shaped me as well, and some of those things I have to break, but I also have to like appreciate because it's also who I am, and so I think that what was happening there for my parents like were trying to run away from you know, influences that, you know, drugs and alcohol and the whole scene. They were trying to find a scene that was safe for our family from their own demons. And I think that was part of that. And where they were trying to find some of that, and whether that was the best or whatever, they're listening to the Beatles and to James Taylor again and stuff now. But, you know, like there was a good 30 years.
It was a rough 30 years. Well, for me, it was Christian music for a long time as a teenager until I discovered Pink Floyd's The Wall, and then that broke me. And I went from Pink Floyd into progressive rock in Rush and the whole that, which, and I find some of that cringe to some degree. I don't think The Wall holds up nearly as well as Dark Side of the Moon. And I mean, I think age, I think maybe just you get cynical after the 500th listen of something. It wears a little thing. You see all the little imperfections at some point, and so you lose objectivity. I do remember how meaningful Amy Grant was to so many teenage girls in the 80s and 90s. I mean, it was like I had young cousins who went to church, and that was like, ooh, that was she was being edgy for them.
Was she
in a very non-edgy way? You know?
Was she the one? Breath of Heaven? Is that Amy Grant? Breath of Heaven,
I don't know.
hold me together. You know that one? You know what I'm
I do
talking about?
know the song, but I don't know if it's Amy Grant. Let's find out.
But I remember when I just was going to say evangelical worship music, the contemporary style that you might that came out of Calvary Chapel, Maranatha Music, and then the Vineyard. The Vineyard took the polish to a new level, and probably not in a good way. But I remember when most of the musicians in Calvary Chapels weren't paid. If they were paid anything, it was, you could probably count it in the tens of dollars for a night, and that was basically to help pay for gas and maybe a little bit of their time. You know, what they would have earned at working at McDonald's or something. What?
I said those are Spotify numbers.
Exactly. Now these worship teams, these startup churches that's their budget, is to pay for the music, it seems like, and the musicians.
Well,
but anyway, thanks guys for fielding my question. Again, congratulations, McMo. Thanks Christian for highlighting our brother and getting him out so much. Good job, guys.
Thanks, Mark. I think Bastiat's Law had a good comment up there a little while ago. Is Rich Mullins or Dallas Holmes cringe, or are they underground enough? I do think, to continue answering Mark's question now that he's gone, I do think there is an element of like one generation's cringe is kind of like their children's underground in a way, and vice versa. You know, like I'm sure there's going to come a day where I'm trying to, well, for one, my kids are never going to like any of this music, you know, they're just going to think it's corny, that, you know, stuff their dad made, I guess. Even if I have kids, Lord willing. But like, I do think there is a cyclical nature to this stuff. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's some like Gen Z Bible study kids who are like hearing DC Talk for the first time, and they're like, holy cow, Jesus Freak rips. It slaps, dude. It rips. But then again, maybe not.
Yeah. It's ripping off of Nirvana is what it's ripping. But yes. I mean, that was a huge album for me. Jesus Freak was. I mean, all of DC Talk was really. I mean, that was, like I said, that's about all I knew. But yeah, dude. Well, I'm coming up on some time here.
Yeah, dude. You got to go, and these comments are just getting started.
Yeah, no. it's like there's so much here. Talk about Christian music in the church, philosophy of Christian music. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to take some of that, like the philosophy, also the arena rock, like is, I mean, Hillsong and Elevation, you know, they built arenas to do arena rock in. Like that's what you have to actually have to really manifest that. And someone's point to, they started listening to rock and roll. Oh, I guess no, it was Mark. He was captured. There is a spirit of rock and roll, and there's a spirit of the arena rock. And if you try to compress that too much, then it's like it all gets like meshed together. And that's, I think, what most people's experience if they're going to just like a small church trying to do arena rock. It needs to be more folk. It needs to have a more folk reality to it.
Yep.
That would be my philosophy from what I'm developing now is, if you're going to do arena rock, you need to own it and you need to go steady from those people.
And I would say it's just as legitimate to do like a loud as crap punk rock show. You know, it doesn't, I think that the kind of like, that kind of question of like, what genre of music do you play for your audience? Like that should not fundamentally, that shouldn't be like a rule you're following, you know, like that was one of the things that kind of bummed me sometimes. If we had like one worship pastor and then we would have a couple of like worship leaders who would kind of lead the music, and they would kind of trade off. And you could just tell that there were some people who were like very uncomfortable if the genre got too rock and roll, or if it got too kind of country, or if it got too gospel. You know, everybody's got their comfort zone or whatever. But I do think that there's like the quality and the excellence of the music, and like if you make your, as it pertains to like worship music, I think if you make the telos like doing all things to the glory of God, and basically making you know, to the best of your ability, playing with skill and taste, and doing that in community with others, you know, like that's the type of thing that's negotiated with the rest of the band, right? Like the drummer can't just decide that you're going to be a thrash metal band.
Like, to be able to do thrash metal.
So, yeah, and I think that kind of like that conversation between the excellence and
genre
and like how do we serve these people, I think that those are kind of all three of the same question. Because if you're playing bluegrass for the church that loves bluegrass music, but you're not practicing and you don't love those people, you might as well just be playing like hip hop. You know, it doesn't matter, you know, like, and so I think it's kind of one of those, like, we can get very spun out with like theological and philosophical debates, but at the end of the day, it really is like
it's
a
embodied
of like,
it's
how
embodied.
well are you loving your neighbor, you know?
Yeah, it's embodied. And to that experience, like I went to an Orthodox church on Sunday, by the way. And
I forgive you.
The part that was meaningful to me was just the chant that was like this long series of like old Eastern chant that I was able to just like immerse myself in.
Yeah. And shout out to your summary video where you sang in quarter tones, I think. I was like, yeah, he nailed it. You nailed it, dude. I was like, yep, you got it.
Thanks, man. But that is the thing, is what can be embodied communally, what can be, but also what can be held as sacred, what can be imbibed, and what is the spirit. And it's hard because it's like you're a Sunday morning at 9-10 o'clock. Like, what are we expecting at that time of day? You know, like, and so I don't know. But those are the questions that I'm continuing to ponder, and it has like,
well, that's the problem, right? Is like so just for your situation, like, there's a world in which you have some expectations about what you want to be doing at 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning and the type of music that feels right to you. And then you've also got a group of people who are probably bringing their own kind of assumptions and preferences to what they would prefer in terms
Yeah.
of like, because my dad is the type who will read his Bible with earplugs in, while the worship music is going. Like he's like, okay, this is loud. I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to, nobody can fault me at church for just sitting down reading my Bible. But then there's also, there are people bored to death in liturgical high church services all over the country every Sunday. And so it's like, I think either you say that one of those two things is right and one of them is wrong, basically, and which means that there's, of course, right ways to do the wrong thing and wrong ways to do the right thing. Or you say that there are infinite ways to glorify God due to
Or
his
universal ways.
infinite and eternal. I think eternal is probably even a better phrase. Universal is too close to the type of thing that'll get you stoned. But there's and so thank you, Tim. That's very sweet of you. I think that the Marylander, for whatever reason, he's one of the most memorable people to me of all of the like Grail Country rando kind of things. Because he pops on like once a quarter, and he's always got something incredibly prescient and interesting to say. And then I also feel like he's got like a very memorable appearance, at least in 2D too. So I kind of, I get
music
I have a good
too.
memory of him.
He's a very musical person. He's got some music on his channel.
Oh, does he really? I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't know that. But yeah, the other thing I was going to posit was like, maybe it's good, maybe like we've talked about this before, like maybe in heaven, quote unquote, it's like you can go, you've got the tabernacle there and you can watch them like do the whole, Day of Atonement liturgy, or you can go to like the high liturgical Latin mass and see what that's all about. Or maybe your style on Tuesday is you go to ortho matins or whatever, and then maybe Friday night you cast your lot in with the big Eva rock band. You throw your hands up, you dance before the Lord. I'm probably going to spend a couple of 1,000 years just with pure gospel music and like praise dance, and I'm a big sucker for like gospel choir music. So like me and Tayo have talked about this, but now I'm getting off rail. You're trying to close this thing up. I'm keeping you on. I apologize.
Well, yeah, but it's getting hot, and it's like tugging at my narcissism to keep things rolling. Yeah, dude, all those things. It's just confusing because I think that because you're making like, it's okay to make references towards like a black culture being something, but we're like, can we make references towards a different culture having preferences, and I think that's like, that I think that those things are real. I don't think there's, because even like, a Greek culture or a Russian culture or an American Protestant culture, like, and that those things are, there's a spirit to all of those things. And some of it's like built into us, and some of it is something we discover. My dad had a really interesting experience. He didn't know, he knew he's half Korean, but he didn't know what the other half was until ancestry.com or whatever.
Half Korean, half amazing.
Half Irish.
Hey, we're related.
And he and my mom went to Ireland and London like this past year. And he loved, like, he sat into some pubs, and my dad's like, he's a drummer and a musician, and
wait, but I have heard you, sorry to interrupt your story completely, but I have heard you say that as it pertains to drinking alcohol, you are way more on the Korean side of things.
Low tolerance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is too. And, but he has that's a big part of his personality, is I think that kind of, he's a playful person, that Irish stereotype. And it was really interesting. He really loved that. And he told me the other day, he was a part of this Facebook group for like half Korean people. And they were like trying to make a trip to go over there, which he went over there in like 88 during the Olympics, with a mission trip thing. But, he was like, I don't want to go. I don't feel like I need to go back. He's like, I'm kind of interested in exploring this other part of my life. I've known this part of my life for like as long as I lived. I just thought it was interesting. So, anyways,
That is interesting.
not as much to do with music and stuff. And
Well,
well,
and
let's you can say what you want to
one
say.
last thought with that, as it pertains to that, is like I do think that there's like a way in which, well, I mean, you were there at Symbolic World when you famously tried to get the scoop on Jordan Peterson talking to what's his name, Father so and so, talking about Nietzsche's eternal recurrence as it pertains to conception of hell.
You know,
But,
that's
like,
the only video clip of that conference that Peugeot has released is the one that like I put out.
yeah. They released the Dirt Poor Robins concert too, I thought.
But I'm talking about from like the keynote, like speaking.
Yeah. Well,
was
the reason I brought that up was like I do think that there's a sense in which, and it has to do with what you're talking about, like it's okay to recognize Black music, but is it okay to recognize like white music and white preferences? And I think the answer is obviously yes. Like I think that that's part of what it means for like the nations to still be the nations in the new heavens and new earth. But like, I also think that there is a sense in which like when like in eternity we'll be able to see like, oh, this is what led to that, and that's what led to this, and we can actually have a full appreciation for not only the like nameless, faceless bard in the 13th century that originally came up with the minor scale, which it was way before that, but you know what I mean, like that kind of musical genius that we'll never know about because he had no way of writing it down, or she had no way of recording it, but then also to kind of chart these huge movements. But I think more important than all of that is the kind of like individual, and this is a very Protestant thing, of course, but like the actual individual using the individual gifts that God gave them to his glory. And so I think that like that's always going to outweigh any type of aesthetic preferences or any type of even kind of ethical standards or any type of idealism towards what is the ideal of beauty in its transcendent nature. Like I think that it's all back to God's infinite fridge where he's going to put up the art of his children, regardless of if it's, the Mona Lisa, or if it's, weird electronic music, or even if it's like, a meal that gets consumed by your family that, they're not going to leave you a Yelp review, but, you did it your best and you did it to the glory of God. I think that that's kind of like, if I could inspire anything, and I'll end my sermon here. But if I could truly inspire anything, it would be for people in this little corner to be more confident and more bold at making things, even if it's going to be stupid or silly or cringe or not as good as Peugeot or not as good as PVK, but the like actual act of creating things, of generating, we call it content, but thinking hard about something and making something, I think is what we actually need alongside the types of conversations that we have. And I find that if I'm doing one more than the other, I start getting a little lopsided, and so I think that you need to intake things, you need to talk about things, but you also do need to create things. And so, yeah, that's what I want to leave you with is if it's a book, if it's a article, if it's a poem, if it's an album, like, please keep creating. And it doesn't even have to be for us, or for the corner, as Alan would say. There's no art for the corner. Yada, yada, yada. He's wrong, but I love him to death. But yeah, like, please make things to the glory of God. And because we all benefit, regardless of the quality.
We all benefit. I think, yeah, I second that, McMo. Dude, I'm glad you asked me to do this. It's an honor to get to like be to platform and like to promote somebody and to encourage, to hopefully be encouraging and to partner, and to fellowship all the good things that we talk about in this space. And so hopefully we can all continue to do that, be a part of that, and continue to create a type of culture, that is good. That is good and true. So anyways, man, we're going to shut this down. I've only got the one McMo song that we're doing tonight, but it's about making babies. So that's a lot of fun. And
Not just about that.
it's not just about that. But yeah, dude, everyone out there, throw up some comments as we're listening to this video going out, and we'll show them out. So McMo, everyone go listen to his album on your preferred streaming service here on YouTube, iTunes, on or Apple Music and Spotify and Prime and whatever else you got. Search McMosif, search McMosa, the name of the album, and let him know. Send him. I don't know what we were talking about. Oh, look if you're on Twitter or you're on X, let him know your favorite song. And
let me know your least favorite song too. I prefer to hear that. And also, thank you very much, Christian, for your hospitality. I really do appreciate it.
Very welcome, dude. All right, y'all have a good night.
Babies are real, babies can hurt you. No, babies are real, babies can hurt you. Just forget about the babies. I'm sorry I brought it up. I'm so sorry for talking and thinking and singing and dreaming about the baby. Please accept this apology. I really believe in babies. I don't believe in myself. Maybe the next one will be a perfection. As for me, I've got no expectations. I wanna be like a baby. They don't believe in themselves. They're so enthralled with all that's involved. They've got no time to be conscious of self. I really believe in babies. I can even be one myself. I'd rather make an enemy out of a friend than love the enemy within. I wanna be like a baby. I wanna forget myself. I'd rather make a mark on my skin, and it's the mark playing to win. I wanna be with my baby. She likes me all by myself. I've gathered tendencies in 7 different years. She's oh so patient. I can't believe that she still puts up with me.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. Hi, this is Christian.